The factory floor stretched into darkness. No hum of motors, no voices calling across assembly lines, only wind through broken windows. February 1985. International Harvester, once the titan of American agriculture, the steel heartbeat of the Midwest, filed for bankruptcy. Over $4 billion in debt. Operations ceased. 35,000 workers sent home. The machines that fed a nation stood silent. Rust claimed what ambition once built. This is not just a story of corporate collapse. It is the unraveling of a promise, the death of an empire that believed it was invincible. How does a giant fall so completely? It began in 1831 when Cyrus McCormick stood in a Virginia wheat field watching his father struggle against time and nature. Harvest was brutal work, backbreaking, endless, and slow. Families could lose entire crops waiting for enough hands to gather what they'd grown. So Cyrus built a machine, the mechanical reaper. It multiplied productivity tenfold. One farmer could now do the work of 20 men, transforming agriculture from subsistence to business. By 1847, he had moved to Chicago, opened a factory, and founded what would become International Harvester, a company built on liberation through innovation. "We don't just make machines," McCormick said at his first investor meeting. "We free men from the earth so they can build something greater." The reaper became the backbone of American agriculture, the tractor, the combine, the very tools that fed a growing nation and fueled westward expansion. Workers took pride in every bolt they tightened, every weld they perfected. Farmers trusted the red IH logo like family. It meant reliability, power, American craftsmanship. By the 1950s, International Harvester controlled 20% of the farm equipment market, employed over 90,000 people, and generated $2 billion in annual revenue, a brand legacy synonymous with progress and the American dream. They didn't just build machines, they built hope across generations. This wasn't just business storytelling, it was the American dream incarnate, proof that innovation could lift entire communities. The company embodied capitalism at its finest, solving real problems, creating jobs, building communities, and proving that private enterprise could serve the common good. Engineers came from across the country to work at IH, not for the pay, but for the mission. But can ambition sustain itself forever? The 1960s were H's zenith, a decade when the red logo meant everything American manufacturing aspired to be. Assembly lines in Rock Island, Fort Wayne, and Louisville hummed day and night, producing tractors that reshaped continents and fed billions. Posters proclaimed, "Powering the Nation." International Harvester wasn't just a company, it was America itself, alive in steel and sweat, muscle and vision. Revenue peaked at $3.6 billion by 1979. Over 100,000 employees, manufacturing presence in 160 countries, the business had become a global industrial empire. The Scout SUV rolled into American driveways, a symbol of rugged independence that competed with Jeep and Bronco. Farmers painted barns red to match their IH tractors. Towns held parades when new models arrived at dealerships. Engineers worked overtime not because they had to, but because they believed they were building the future of agriculture. "We're not just building machines," one Fort Wayne foreman said, "we're building the backbone of civilization." But dominance breeds blindness, and behind the celebration, warning signs flickered. Record profits masked rising production costs, aging infrastructure, and a management decision culture resistant to change. Competitors like John Deere invested in R&D while IH distributed profits to shareholders, a strategic miscalculation that would prove fatal. Behind the glory, cracks had already begun to form. Japanese manufacturers studied American efficiency and improved upon it. Deere modernized, Caterpillar innovated, and inside IH's boardrooms, complacency settled like dust on unused blueprints. This business case study would later reveal how market leaders fall. Through arrogance, through ignoring market competition, through believing yesterday's success guarantees tomorrow's survival. One engineer remembers, we stopped asking what's next and started asking how much more can we make. When you believe you're invincible, who warns you of the fall? In 1977, Brooks McCormick, the last family member in leadership, stepped down after decades of steady, principled guidance. In his place came Archie McCardell, a former Xerox executive with no farming background, no manufacturing experience, but plenty of Wall Street ambition. He promised investors one thing: aggressive growth. McCardell's strategy: slash labor costs, automate production aggressively, expand market share through predatory pricing, and maximize short-term returns. Profit over brand legacy, numbers over people. On paper, it looked brilliant. Financial analysts praised his modern approach. Investors applauded, workers trembled. We're going to run this company like a business, McCardell declared at his first town hall, not a family heirloom or a charity. He cut salaries by 20%, reduced quality control inspections, pushed production targets beyond what equipment and people could sustain. Engineers who once stayed late out of pride now clocked out in silence, demoralized. The culture shifted, from craftsmanship to quotas, from innovation to extraction, from community to commodity. To fund expansion, IH borrowed heavily, over $600 million in new debt within 3 years, raising total liabilities to nearly $4 billion, a classic case of financial mismanagement driven by shareholder pressure and executive hubris. One union leader stood in the Fort Wayne break room watching younger workers leave for Honda and Toyota. This place used to feel like home. Now it feels like a prison where we're just numbers on a spreadsheet. This was corporate greed disguised as modernization, the seed of company downfall planted in boardroom ambition and watered with arrogance. Veteran workers saw it clearly. They're killing the goose that laid the golden eggs. When profit becomes the only goal, what happens to purpose, to people, to the promise that built everything? And when a company forgets its soul, what's left to hold it together? By 1979, the empire was fracturing from within, and everyone could feel it except those in the boardroom. Farmers, IH's loyal base for generations, began buying Japanese Kubota tractors, cheaper, more reliable, more fuel efficient. The Scout SUV, outdated design, outmatched by competitors, bleeding money with every unit sold. IH's market share dropped from 20% to 14% in just 3 years. Operating losses mounted, $397 million in 1980 alone. Textbook financial downfall caused by strategic paralysis and leadership failure. Then came the strike that would break the company's back. November 1979, 35,000 United Auto Workers walked off the line, the longest strike in farm equipment history, lasting 6 brutal months. No production, no revenue, no compromise. Management, led by McCardell, refused to negotiate fairly. Arrogance had replaced dialogue, contempt had replaced respect. The strike cost IH over $600 million in lost production and sales. Inventory sat unsold in warehouses. Dealers, desperate for product, defected to John Deere and Case, a catastrophic management decision that accelerated the corporate collapse. One machinist stood outside the Fort Wayne plant, sign in hand, November wind biting. We built this place with our hands for 3 generations, and they're tearing it down with spreadsheets and greed. Inside boardrooms, executives argued over quarterly negotiation tactics and quarterly projections. Outside, families struggled to buy groceries, pay mortgages, keep the lights on. The machines kept running after the strike ended in April 1980, but the spirit was gone forever. Quality slipped, morale collapsed. Loyalty, once IH's greatest asset, vanished like smoke. This business documentary moment captures the essence of rise and fall, when management decisions prioritize control over collaboration, when executives forget that workers are the foundation of any empire, everything crumbles from within. When leadership forgets the people who built the dream, what empire can survive? (1981). The death spiral accelerated beyond any possibility of recovery. Interest rates soared past 20% under Federal Reserve Chair Paul Volcker's anti-inflation policies, and farmer credit dried up overnight. Agricultural recession hit like a hammer. Farm bankruptcies doubled nationwide. Equipment sales plummeted 40% industry-wide. IH, already drowning in debt, faced perfect conditions for company downfall. International Harvester was caught in a perfect storm. $4 billion in debt, 20+% interest rates on that debt, collapsing sales, broken dealer relationships, and a shattered internal culture. Banks demanded immediate payment. Creditors circled like vultures. Bond ratings dropped to junk status. By 1982, in a desperate attempt to survive, IH announced it would sell its agricultural equipment division, the very heart of the company, the soul of its identity, the reason it existed for 135 years. Workers gathered in parking lots, stunned into silence. "They're selling our legacy," one third-generation welder whispered, tears streaming. "Everything our grandfathers built, gone." February 1985, International Harvester filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. $4.2 billion in total debt, assets liquidated at pennies on the dollar. The financial mismanagement and strategic blindness had consumed everything. One by one, the lights went out across America's industrial heartland. The gates that once welcomed thousands of workers each morning closed forever, chains wrapped tight. The same hands that built an empire were left empty, holding only pink slips and memories. A janitor walked the silent Fort Wayne factory floor one last time, turning off lights that had burned for 80 years, locking doors that would never open again, and wept. This wasn't just corporate collapse, it was the death of belief itself, the end of a promise made to generations. Every business case study on corporate failure points here. When debt exceeds value, when culture dies before the balance sheet, when market competition exploits every weakness, the machine stops and silence floods in. Was it greed, or was it the inevitable cost of progress that killed them? Years later, weeds grew tall where steel once roared and sparks once flew like stars. The Fort Wayne plant became a storage facility for Amazon boxes. The Rock Island complex demolished, replaced by a parking lot. 35,000 workers permanently displaced. Entire small-town economies devastated overnight. Hundreds of suppliers bankrupted. A 135-year brand legacy reduced to business case study material taught in MBA classrooms as a cautionary tale. An old engineer named Harold returns to the abandoned Louisville facility on a gray afternoon, running his weathered hand along rusted machinery he once operated with pride. "We used to believe we were invincible," he says quietly to no one. "We forgot that empires fall the moment they stop listening to workers, to customers, to reality itself." Economists called it necessary market correction, inevitable, efficient, even healthy for the economy. But to those who lived through it, it was a loss that numbers and graphs could never measure or contain. Families split under financial stress, marriages strained and broke. Small towns withered as tax bases evaporated. Suicide rates climbed. Addiction spread. The social fabric unraveled. Post-collapse analysis revealed the core failures: over-leveraging during expansion, ignoring competitive innovation, prioritizing short-term profits over long-term sustainability, catastrophic labor relations, and leadership that valued shareholders over stakeholders, corporate lessons written in blood, rust, and broken communities. The lessons were written in dust and decay. Leadership without humility is tyranny. Growth without foundation is a house of cards. Profit without purpose is just extraction disguised as progress, and all roads lead to collapse. One union representative stands at a memorial erected in Rock Island. They didn't just lose a business, they destroyed a way of life, an identity, a belief that honest work meant something. This business documentary reveals the brutal human cost behind financial downfall, the faces behind the numbers, the families behind the statistics, the dreams behind the bankruptcy filings. Was it inevitable, or was it a choice they made at every critical turn? But not all was lost to bankruptcy courts and liquidation auctions. From the wreckage emerged Navistar International, smaller, leaner, humbler, focused solely on trucks and diesel engines. The IH agricultural equipment brand was sold to Tenneco in 1985, later acquired by C&H Industrial, where the red logo still appears on tractors sold worldwide, a brand legacy that somehow survived corporate collapse through sheer power of reputation. Engineers who lost their jobs didn't lose their knowledge or their pride. They joined competitors, started their own shops, taught the next generation. One former IH designer now works for John Deere in Milan. Everything I learned about precision manufacturing, about building for farmers instead of shareholders, I learned on that Fort Wayne factory floor. I carry those lessons forward every day. The spirit of innovation didn't die with the bankruptcy. It evolved, dispersed, and took root in new soil. Vintage IH tractors became collector's items, symbols of an era when American manufacturing meant something profound beyond quarterly earnings. Today, fully restored IH farmals sell at rural auctions for premium prices, $50,000 or more for models that originally cost $3,000. Nostalgia has been transformed into measurable economic value, brand legacy commodified through collective memory and longing. At rural fairs across the Midwest every summer, old farmers gather around polished red tractors, swapping stories across generations. My father bought this 560 in 1963, worked it for 40 years. It still runs smoother than anything modern. Every rusted bolt tells a story of men and women who refused to give up, even when their empire did. This chapter of business storytelling proves that legacy can transcend company downfall, that values outlive balance sheets, that reputation survives bankruptcy, that what people build together matters more than what executives destroy. Business ethics demand we remember this truth. Capitalism without conscience creates wealth temporarily, then destroys communities permanently. The IH story teaches us that true innovation serves people first, profit second, and when that order reverses, collapse becomes inevitable. Can legacy survive collapse, or is memory the only empire that never truly falls? The factory is silent again, as it was in the beginning before McCormick's first reaper changed everything. The echo of engines, gone, yet eternal in the memories of those who heard them roar. International Harvester, a name that once shook the earth and fed nations, now whispers through history books, dusty barns, and grandfathers' stories. In the end, it wasn't foreign competition or economic forces alone that destroyed them. It was forgetting why they started, losing sight of purpose in pursuit of profit. This business case study teaches the ultimate corporate lesson: purpose over profit, people over numbers, mission over market capitalization. They began with a promise to free humanity from endless backbreaking labor, to give farmers the tools to feed a growing world. They ended with a different pursuit: quarterly earnings, share price, executive compensation, profit at any cost, even the cost of their own soul. The machines didn't fail. They ran until the day the lights went out. The vision failed. The leadership failed. The promise failed. One old worker stands at the memorial plaque in Hinsdale, Illinois, where the corporate headquarters once towered. We didn't just lose jobs and paychecks. We lost belief in the American promise that hard work and loyalty meant something. But perhaps that's the lesson that echoes loudest, that empires built on innovation must remain humble or die proud, that growth without wisdom is just expansion toward inevitable collapse, that the people who build the dream with their hands and hearts must never be forgotten by those who profit from spreadsheets and stock options. The wind blows cold through empty fields where factories once stood. Somewhere in Iowa, an old IH Farmall 560 still runs. Red paint faded to pink, engine strong as the day it rolled off the line. This business documentary ends where all rise and fall stories must, with somber reflection on business ethics, on leadership failure, on the human cost of corporate greed, and on the question that haunts every empire: what matters more, what we build, or how we treat those who build it? It wasn't the machine that broke, it was us.